Yesterday we learned Middos, Perek Beis, and we learned Mishnah Gimel. And the Mishnayos are now going in a very orderly fashion, as if you're walking through the Har HaBayis and into the Beis HaMikdash. So it's going from to west. And so right now, what we've learned about, if we go to diagram number 3, okay, what we've learned about the outer area here, the white area, would be the Har HaBayis.
No,
Let's start with the Har HaBayis. And we're going to be working in this area today. The Shar HaMizrach is called Shar Shushan Habira. So a person entered the city of Yerushalayim, walked through Shar Shushan Habira on the east. Again, not that he had to. He could have come through the southern to Shari Hulda, or he could have come through the western Shar Kipunos. Shar Tedi, we mentioned, was not exit and entry. That was for Kohanim who became Tomei in the Beis HaMikdash. But we're going to focus today on the Shar HaMizrach. Someone's come into the city of Yerushalayim. He walks to the Har HaBayis. He enters the Shar Shushan Habira, and now he's on Har HaBayis. He hasn't entered the structure of the Beis HaMikdash yet. He's on Har HaBayis. We mentioned that Har HaBayis, remember, this is critical when you're thinking about Yerushalayim and the Har HaBayis. We had the picture of the Jewish people as they were encamped in the Midbar. We'll find that picture. The Jewish people, when they were encamped in the Midbar, there were three halachic areas. There were 3 shvatim on each side, 4 sides, 3 times 4 is 12. 3 shvatim with their flags, east, west, north, and south. And the area that the Bnei Yisrael were in is called Machne Yisrael. God forbid if someone became a Metzorah, he became Tomei Metzorah, the halacha is he has to be sent out from all 3 machanos. He had to be sent out of Machne Yisrael. He couldn't be inside any of these flagged areas. That's the most severe tumah. He was sent out. Bodod yeshev michutz lamachane moshovo. This person has to be by himself outside the 3 machanos. And Hashem, today, if we have time, we're going to actually get to a place in the Ezra's Noshim that was designated for a Metzorah. So this is the first camp, Machne Yisrael. When you walked further in towards the middle, there were 4 additional camps. Moshe and Aaron, Gershom, Kahas, and Merari. Levi encamped around the Mishkan. Levi had 3 sons, Gershom, Kahas, Merari. Of course, Moshe and Aaron come from Kahas, but they had their own camp. So 3 sides, Gershom, Kahas, Merari. The 4th side is Moshe, Aaron, and their sons. In the center of everything is the Mishkan. So where the Jewish people lived under their flags is called Machne Yisrael. Where Moshe, Aaron, and the Levium lived around the Mishkan is called Machne Leviah. Where the Mishkan itself is, inside the Mishkan, that's Machne Shechina. And this is how Yerushalayim was built halachically. The city of Yerushalayim, when you entered the city of Yerushalayim, you were now in Machne Yisrael, with whatever halachas Machne Yisrael has. When you entered the Har HaBayis, irrespective of what gate you came through, when you entered the Har HaBayis, you were now in Machne Leviah. When you entered the Azorah, Again, we're not talking about the Ezras Noshim. Let's make believe it's not there. The Azora, this is the Machane Shechina. So outside this dark black wall is the city of Jerusalem, Machane Yisrael. You enter this wall and you're in Machane Leviah. And if you entered Shar Nicanor above the 15 steps, you're now in Machane Shechina. In truth, as we mentioned, this Ezras Noshim is absolutely Machane Leviah. And whatever you can do on the Har Habayis Machane Leviah, you can do in the Ezras Noshim Machane Leviah in terms of biblical rules. This Ezras Noshim is not halachically part of the Azora. This Azora, the top square, is Machane Shechina. The Ezras Noshim is Machane Leviah. However, Midrabanan, rabbinically, they made the Ezras Noshim a higher Kedusha than the Har Habayis. Now we have to review something that we did yesterday. You entered Yerushalayim, entered Shushan Habira, you're in Har Habayis, you want to enter the Beis HaMikdash. There was a thin wall here, the thin dark line, that's the Soreg. That's where the Yevonim punctured 13 holes, and then when the Hashmonaim defeated them, they repaired the holes, and there were signs at these holes, and if you passed by one of these holes, you bow down. If you walked around the whole Beis HaMikdash, you would have bowed down 13 times. There were 13 holes. This is the wall, the Soreg. Between that thin line, the thin black line, and the thick black line is a place called the Chayil. If you walked into the Ezras Noshim, it means you walked through the Chayil. You walk through the Ezras Noshim, you get to the 15 steps, you walk up to the 15 steps, and now you're truly inside the Azora. This is now Machane Shechina. The first place in the Azora, when you enter these 15 steps, is called Ezras Yisrael. That's where Yisrael can go. Beyond that, it's called Ezras Kohanim. This is an important diagram to simply memorize in your mind. Yerushalayim, Har Habayis, Soreg, Chayil, Ezras Noshim, 15 steps, Shar Nicanor, Ezras Yisrael, Ezras Kohanim, Mizbeach. We haven't learned anything yet about this structure here, which is the Ulam and the Heichel, but that's what's going to be our subject matter for today. So we're going to take a look quickly at something we learned yesterday. Mishnah Gimel. Lifnimi Menu. If you continue walking through the Har Habayis, this is page 31, Soreg Gavoa Asara Tvachim. You have that wall called the Soreg, and it's 10 Tvachim high. Ushlosh Esrei Protzes HaYisham. There were 13 punctures. Sheprotzim Al Chayavan. The Yevonim punctured these holes because remember the Soreg was the demarcation line, no goyim beyond this point. They didn't like that idea. They wanted everyone's equal, everybody's the same kind of thing. That was the Greek hashkafa. And so they punctured holes to show that anybody can go past the chayil. V'gazru kenegdam shlosh esrei yishtachavoyos, and Chazal made a rule that you would bow at each one of these punctures, which then were resealed. And every time you passed one of these punctures, you bow down. If you pass 2 of them, you bow down twice, and then you can leave the Har Habayis. If you passed 8, you would bow down 8 times. You went around the whole Har Habayis, you would have ended up bowing 13 times. Lifnim mimenu. If you enter this wall, the Soreg, Hachel. You have the Chayil, and the Chayil is Eser Amos. So we go back to our famous diagram 3. This area, This light area before the thick wall is called the chayil. We had a good picture of that yesterday. Excuse me. Diagram 13. Harabayas, Soreg. You enter the Soreg, there was the chayil, and the chayil had steps. Because as we explained, the Harabayas is moving this way, and that's going to be key for us to understand the new Mishnah that we're going to learn today. The Harabayas was built, it went up, flat, up, flat. And the way it went up was through steps. So as we learned yesterday, if someone was on the Harabayas, he walked, and you would have to go up 12 steps to get into the Ezras Nashim. Each step is a half an amma high. So 12 steps are 6 amos, which means you walked into the Harabayas, you went up 12 steps, which is 6 amos. You entered now the Ezras Nashim. So there are these steps in diagram 13. There are steps inside the chayil so that you can go up into the entry of the Ezras Nashim. So the Ezras Nashim is 6 amos higher than the Har Habayis. So the Mishnah said, there were 12 steps. We're on page 32. There were 12 steps in the chayil. Each step is a half amma high and a half amma deep. Deep means where you would put your foot down on. So the amma is going up one, and the amma is going in, and the step is going up a half an amma and in a half an amma. If you keep on doing that 12 times, you created now a height of 6 amos. All the steps in the Harabayas, all the steps in the Beis Hamikdash were a half amma high and a half amma in depth. Chutz mishal ulam, except for the ulam structure, that's that rectangular structure that we've not learned about. The steps were different here. There are 12 steps here, but they were different. All the entryways and the gates, Gavam Esrim Amma, they were 20 amos high, Baruchbam Eser amos, and they were 10 amos wide. Chutz Misha Ulam, except for the Ulam. So every entry, it doesn't make a difference if it's an entry into the Harabayas. Diagram 2. Shar Shushan or Shari Chulda. They are 20 amos high and 10 amos wide. You want to enter into the Ezras Nashim, the opening is 20 amos high, 10 amos wide. Shar Nikanor, 20 amos high, 10 amos wide. The exception to that is the opening of the Ulam, which is double. It's 40 amos high and 20 amos wide. So every opening is 20 amos high, 10 amos wide, except for the ulam. Kol ha'psachim shayusham hoylem dlatot chutz mishal ulam. Kol ha'sham shayusham hoylem shkufas. We learned this yesterday. All the openings had doors, except again this structure, this rectangular structure, had an opening that was 40 amos high, 20 amos wide, but didn't have doors. It had a curtain there. Kolash Om Shayusham Hoylem Shkofos Chus Mishel Teddy Shayusham Shtei Avonim Mutozu Al Gavzu. Every entry, we're going to have I did my best I could. We're going to have a demonstration in a couple of minutes. But this is what a normal quote unquote door looks like. 2 doorposts, a lintel on top. This is how every entry exit in the Beis Hamikdash and Harabayas looked, except for Shar Teddy. Going back to diagram 2. Shushan Habira to the east, Hulda, the two of them to the south, Kipunus to the west, and here Teddy to the north. And nobody used this except, no one was supposed to use it except for Kohanim who became Tameh. And to show people not to use this as an entry exit, this is different than the other 4. They built it not like this. They rather built it like this. Shar Teddy looked like that. It was a triangle on top. So the other 4 entrances to the Har HaBayis were normal doorposts with a lintel. This Shar Teddy, the north of the Har HaBayis, looked like this, and that made people stop and think, why is this built this way? Oh, because I'm not supposed to go in here because this is a private entry exit for the Kohanim. All the doors in the Har HaBayis and the Beis HaMikdash, originally, when the Olei Bavel came to build the second Beis HaMikdash, they were quite poor. We talked about that yesterday. Only 43,000 approximately people came. The rest of the folks stayed behind in Bavel. And they were poor. And to build a Beis HaMikdash with all the gold necessary, the copper, the material, they simply didn't have the money, the funds to do it. So they built these doors out of wood and covered them with copper. When they eventually got wealthier, either in the time of the Hashmonaim or in the time of Hordus, they switched the covering to the doors. Let's just assume it's coverings. They switched the coverings to all the doors from copper to gold, except for those 2 Shari Nicanor. Diagram number 3. By now we've memorized Shari Nicanor. You walked in, 15 steps, Shari Nicanor, those 2 doors that Nicanor brought from Egypt, and those were left to be copper. They didn't change them. One is to remember the miracle that happened to those doors, as we've discussed several times, which is the storm on the ship as he was coming back. They threw the door off the ship. They were going to throw the second door off the ship. He grabbed it and said, if you throw it off the ship, I'm going with it. And the storm stopped. They came to Akko. He only had 1 door, and then he found the second door actually traveled with them under the ship. And therefore, even when they were wealthy enough to change the doors from copper to gold, they left these as copper to remember the miracle. Others say, the Mishnah says, in the nation of Chushta Matziv, it was such a fine, expensive copper that it had a shine like gold, and therefore they didn't change. We're up to now our new Mishnah. Middos Perek Beis, Mishnah Dalet. There's a picture. I forgot to write the number at the bottom of it. I wrote it on my copy, but I forgot to write it on the scanned copy. It's diagrammed with what is going to be called 16. I don't like these kind of pictures because they're colorful depictions of something we know nothing about. But for that purpose, but for our purposes, it'll give us an idea of what we're talking about. I want to remind everybody, we originally learned very early in the Masechta when we were learning about the doorways, the entranceways in our Bais. This was diagram 1. Diagram 1, this is the east, this is the west. This is the north, this is the south. I get that right? Hopefully, because I'm looking at it in the opposite direction. This is the east. That's what's important for us right now. This is the east. And this is Shar Shushan Habira. We learned that there was a bridge from Har HaZeisim, Har HaMishcha, and here you can see part of the bridge. There was a bridge from Har HaZeisim that went towards Shushan Habira. The purpose of that bridge was when they needed to shech and burn a para aduma to create para aduma ash to purify a person who became a tamei mace. You needed the para aduma ash. This para aduma had to be slaughtered and burnt on Har HaZeisim. Har HaZeisim is outside the wall of Yerushalayim. It's chutz l'shalosh machanos. We said the city of Yerushalayim, inside the wall of the city of Yerushalayim, is Machne Yisrael. You're looking at this picture. Outside this wall is Yerushalayim. Inside this wall is Har HaBayis. Inside here is Machne Shechina. This is still Machne Yisrael. You had to take the Parah Aduma outside Machne Yisrael. And so it was taken to Har HaZeisim. And the Kohen, the Mishnah uses the word Kohen Gadol, but there's a question, a machlokas, whether the Kohen Gadol is the one that has to burn the Parah Aduma, or can any Kohen do it? So I'm just going to use the word Kohen. The Kohen walked out of the eastern gate of the Har HaBayis with the Parah Aduma and with an entourage of Kohanim and others that were going to help him do the avodah of the Parah Aduma. The reason the Parah Aduma was brought to the Beis HaMikdash was it had to be inspected by the Sanhedrin in probably the Lishkas Hagazos. That's that room where the 71 great poskim sat. And that's part of the Beis HaMikdash that we haven't learned about yet. Where is that Lishkas Hagazos? So they inspected this red heifer and they said, yes, it's okay, it's fine. They left the Beis HaMikdash. They walked through the Har HaBayis. They came to Shushan Habira, and rather than having to walk up a mountain, a steep mountain, to get to the top of Har HaZeisim, they built this bridge. And this bridge brought them to the Har HaZeisim. So you have the Kohen, his entourage, and the Parah Aduma. Remember, we learned about the special bridge. It was made with openings. It was double openings, keepin al gabe keepin, because of the rules of Tahara. Let's see if we can find that picture, remind ourselves. Here it is. This is the picture of what the bridge looked like. Keepin al gabe keepin, arches on arches, but the arches were not one above the other. The lower arches and then the legs of the second arch would be towards the opening of the bottom arch. So the legs of the top arches were in the middle of the opening of the bottom arches, and we learned about it then. That's for purposes of Hilchos Tumah and Tahara. So the Kohen is now going to walk with the Parah Aduma and his assistants. Going back to diagram 16. He's on Har HaZeisim. The Parah Aduma is there. You can see the bridge, two sets of arches, and all the way down is the wall of the Har HaBayis, behind which is the Beis HaMikdash. Now here there's going to be a problem, and that's the problem that our Mishnah today is going to discuss. Let's go back to diagram 2. The Kohen is standing on Har Hazeisim, and after he slaughters the Parah Aduma, blood is taken from the Parah Aduma and is sprinkled in the direction of the Beis Hamikdash 7 times. Okay, 7 sprinkles towards the Beis Hamikdash. A little more complicated than that, which we'll see in a moment. The Kohen Gadol is standing there, and he's looking straight across the bridge. At the end of the bridge, there's the wall of the Har Habayis. Behind that, let's go to this now. Kohen Gadol is standing somewhere here on the Har HaMishcha. He's looking down through the Shushan Habira gate. This is what he wants to do. This is what he's required to do, Min HaTorah. He has to look through the Shushan Habira gate. He has to look through the gate of the Soreg. He has to look through the gate of the Esros Nashim. He has to look through the Shar Nikanor. He has to look through the door of the Ulam. And he has to see the opening of the Heichel, right here. Behind this opening, we know that there's the Shulchan that held the Lechem upon him on the north side, the Menorah on the south side, and the Mizbeach HaKtoris in the center. The Kohen Gadol, he's standing on Har Hazeisim Har HaMishcha, and he's going to sprinkle the blood 7 times towards the Beis Hamikdash. But he can't just sprinkle the blood 7 times towards the Beis Hamikdash. He has to see this opening at the Heichel. He has to be able to see through all these walls. Wall of the Har Habayis, wall of the Esros Nashim, wall at Shar Nikanor, wall at Ulam, and then he comes to the Heichel. He has to see this opening when he sprinkles the blood. He must. Now that's quite a trick, and that's what the Mishnah is going to talk about today. So this Kohen Gadol, or Kohen, is going to sprinkle the blood. He's got to see, first of all, it's a nice distance to be able to see that far to begin with. That's pretty nice in and of itself. But he has to be able to see the opening of the Heichel. Now, how are we going to do that with so many walls in between? And that's going to be the discussion in our Mishnah today. And for this purpose of the Mishnah, we need to have our construction hats on. And that's why I did my best to create a demonstration of what we're going to be learning today. Okay. So, Middos Perek Beis Mishnah Daled. Kol HaKesolim Shehoyu Sham, all the walls that were around the Har Habayis, diagram 2. All the walls around the Har Habayis, Shushan Habira, all these walls were very high. We don't know exactly. Some Shita say they were 100 amos high, about 220 feet high. And some say they were 40 amos high, which would be about 140 feet high, but they were very tall walls. Now remember, inside these walls, there are doors. How large is each door? We learned that a few moments ago. Each door is 10 amos wide and 20 amos high, except for the ulam. So let's look and focus right now on the Shar of the Mizrach, the Shushan Habira, because that's what we're dealing with today. The Kohen Gadol is on the east and looking towards west. Let's think about this wall here, the eastern wall of the Har Habayis. And let's assume that the eastern wall of the Har Habayis is 100 amos high. In that 100 amos, there's an opening that's 20 amos high. That's the Shar Shushan Habira. It's 20 amos high, which means above the entry of Shushan Habira, there's 80 amos. The wall reaches the height of 100, And in the wall, they made an opening at some point that's 10 amos wide and 20 amos high, which means above the opening of 20 amos, there's still an 80 amma wall. So the Mishnah says on page 35, Kol aksolim shehoyu sham, hoyu gavoim. All the walls around the Har HaBayis were very tall, 40 amos or 100 amos. Chutz mikosal hamizrachi, except for the eastern wall of the Har HaBayis, except for this wall. This wall is, southern wall is 100 amos high. The western wall is 100 amos high. The northern wall is 100 amos high, and the eastern wall is lower. Why? Because the Kohen Gadol who's standing on Har HaZeisim, if the wall of the Har HaBayis were regular height of 100 amos, he couldn't see inside the Har HaBayis. He couldn't see the Beis HaMikdash, and he would not be able to see the Heichel. He would not be able to see this opening if the eastern wall were very high. So they reduced the height of the eastern wall for the sole purpose of the Kohen Gadol when he burned a paradum, and there weren't that many in Jewish history. The Gemara talks about that in Yuma, how many were burned in all of Jewish history. But for that purpose, the eastern wall was made lower, so the Kohen Gadol can go to the Har HaZeisim, see inside the Beis HaMikdash. So now there's a machlokes hamafarshim. Some say that the entire eastern wall was low. And some say, no. The eastern wall was as high as all the other walls, 100. They only lowered the place above the door, because that's where the Kohen Gadol has to look through, which we'll see in a moment. So the whole eastern wall can be 100 amos high. It doesn't disturb anybody. The point that had to be lower was at the entrance to the Har HaBayis. At Shushan Habir, it had to be lower. And now we're going to do some construction work here. I'm not good at this, but I worked on it. Each time I learn this Mishnah, I come up with a different diagram or a different kind of show and tell. I think this time I actually may have gotten it right. So we can assume that the eastern wall is 100 amos high, like any other wall around the Har HaBayis. They just lowered it right here. So if you want to imagine this for a moment, we have the Shar Shushan Habira. And around the Shar Shushan Habira is a wall. The Shushan Habira opening is 20 amos high. And above everything, there's wall. There's a wall going north, there's a wall going south, and there's a wall going up. How high up does that wall go? Normally would go another 80 amos. 20 plus 80 would make this 100. However, they cut out the wall here. Right here above the door, they cut out the wall. How much did they cut out? And that's what we're going to learn about right now. They left 5.5 amos above the doorpost. So from the ground until the top of the wall was 25.5 amos. That's an important number. 20 plus the wall above the door, the wall above the lintel, 5.5. So from the ground until the top, 25.5. So from the ground until the top here is 100. From the ground here until the top is 100. Here they cut it out, so from the ground till the top was only 25 and a half. Okay. Now, why is that number 25 and a half important? So now we need to go back to what we learned yesterday and what we learned earlier today. The Ezras Nashim was 6 amos higher than the Har HaBayis. We said that when you want to go from the Har HaBayis into the Ezras Nashim, you had to go up 12 steps. Right? This is the picture we looked at yesterday, diagram 14. You're in the Har HaBayis. You come to that wall Chel. Behind the Chel is the Soreg area, 10 amos. 4 amos of the Chel are the same ground level as the Har HaBayis, and then the steps start. Half amma up, half amma in, half amma up, half amma in, 12 times, which means that right here, when you walked into the Ezras Nashim, you were 6 amos higher than when you were here. So the Ezras Nashim is 6 amos higher than the Har HaBayis. Now let's think about this for a moment. The door of Shushan Habira is 20 amos high. Right, let's start the demonstration with 3 options. Okay. Let's see if we can catch this. Let's see how we do this. We'll pick it up. Okay, make believe I'm standing on Har HaMishcha. Okay, do it this way. I am standing on Har HaMishcha, and there's a distance between me and this is the doorway into the Ezras Nashim. This is the doorway into the Har HaBayis. Option 1 is that they don't do anything. They just leave the wall, the eastern wall, 100 amos high across the whole wall. They don't do the cut that I showed you on the wood. They just leave the wall at 100 amos high. Now I'm standing here, which is, of course, I'd be standing even further back. Standing here, and I'm on the Har HaZeisim, and I want to sprinkle blood. What I see is the wall of the Har HaBayis. It's 100 amos high. I can barely see the top of the wall of the Ezras Nashim, just barely. And my vision goes straight. There is not a chance in the world that I can see all the way past here into the Shar Nikinar, into the Ulam, and into the Heichal. It's an absolute impossibility. My vision is blocked. I can't get in to see the Heichal. If, however, I look through the Shar Nikinar, the Shar of the Har HaBayis, that's not going to help me either. And that's what we have the diagram for. That's option 2. Option 1 is not to do anything. Option 1 is simply to leave the wall of the eastern, wall at 100 amos high. Just leave it. That's absolutely impossible because the Kohen Gadol can't see anything from Har HaZeisim, let alone he can't see all the way into here. Can't do it. So that's not an option. Option 2 is maybe we don't cut the wall, but we tell the Kohen when he's on the Har HaZeisim, he should look through the opening of the Shushan Habib. Focus your eyes right here. You can't focus your eyes on top of the wall. The wall's 100 amas high. If that's where you focus your eyes, on the top of the wall, make believe that, okay, there's no cutout, solid wall. We tell the Kohen, look above the wall and see if you can see the Heichel. Impossible, not an option. Option 2, we tell the Kohen, and we keep the wall 100, but we tell the Kohen, focus your eyes not above the wall, focus your eyes inside the Shushan Habira. Okay? Now this is pretty simple. If he focuses his eyes inside the Shushan Habira, how high is the Shushan Habira opening? 20 amos high. So his vision is 20 amos. Now remember, as you go into the Beis HaMikdash, it's getting higher and higher. The Ezras Noshim is 6 amos higher than the Har Habayis. Sha'ar Nicanor, 15 steps, makes it another 7.5 amos. So as the inclines keep on going higher and higher, even if he were to look through here instead of through here, the Beis HaMikdash is getting higher and higher as you go in. He still couldn't see the opening of the Heichel. Not possible. So what did they do? Okay. He can't look through here. That's not helpful because of the incline of the Beis HaMikdash. He can't look on top of the wall because then he can't see anything. So this is what they did. They cut out the wall right above the door, the Shushan Habira. They left 5.5 amos here. Everybody got the trick now? From the ground to the top of this wall is 25.5. The height of the door is 20. They left a piece of wall on top of the door, 5.5. It's 25.5. Cohen can't look into here. He can't look above here. They cut this. Now he has a vision where he can see 25.5 amos above ground level. Rabbi say, how high was the Ezras Noshim? We said that to get to the Ezras Noshim, you had to climb 12 steps. Each step was a half amma high. Therefore, the Ezras Noshim was 6 amas higher than the Har Habayis. So there is now, he can see 25.5. The Ezras Noshim, as you go in, the Ezras Noshim is 26. He has now a half an amma between 25.5 and 26 that he can actually see. For this now we have a diagram. And this is diagram 15. This is the diagram of our Mishnah. If they leave the wall as is, they're showing you a picture of the Kohen on top of Har HaZeisim. If they left the wall completely 100 amas high, there's not a chance he can see anything. He has to see all the way in. If they tell him to forget about looking above the wall, they tell him to look inside the door, Shushan Habira. So they're showing you how eventually his sight is going to be cut off. That's the dotted line. His sight's going to get cut off. He will not be able to see the Heichel. And how do we know he can't see the Heichel? We made this cheshbon yesterday. You enter diagram 2. You enter the Har Habayis. You want to go to the Ezras Noshim. You're now 6 amas higher than you were before. Sha'ar Nicanor has 15 steps. Each step a half amma higher. That's 7.5. And when you walk into Sha'ar Nicanor, you're now 13.5 amas higher than you were on the Har Habayis. Again, you went up 6 amas for the Ezras Noshim, a 7.5 additional amas at Nicanor. You're now 13.5 amas higher than you were on the Har Habayis. You walked into Ezras Yisrael. you walked into Ezra's Kohanim. Ezra's Kohanim was 2.5 amas higher than the Ezra's Yisrael. So you have 6 entering the Ezra's Nashim, 7.5 entering Nicanor. That's 13.5. 2.5 to the Ezra's Kohanim. That's 16. If you're in the Ezra's Kohanim, you're 16 amas higher than the Harabayas. You continue walking to the Ulam. We haven't learned about the Ulam, but the Ulam has 12 steps. 12 steps again is another 6 amos. So if you walk into the Ulam in the Heichel, you're now 22 amos higher than the Harabayas. We're going this way, up and up and up. So again, you're in the Harabayas, which we'll call ground zero. You walk into the Ezra's Nashim, you're 6 amas higher. You walk through Shar Nicanor, you're 13.5 amos higher. You walk into Ezra's Yisrael, you're 16 amos higher. You walk into the Ulam, you're now 22 amos higher. And now the Heichal and the Ulam are 22 amos higher than the Harabayas. Okay? Now let's go back to this door. This door gives you a vision from the ground to the high point of the door of 20 amos. So we tell the Kohen, don't look over the wall because you won't see the Heichal. Look inside the door. Well, if he looks inside the door, his vision is from the ground until 20 amos high. And he keeps on looking straight. And he looks straight, and he looks straight, and he looks straight. And the Beis HaMikdash is going like this. This is Harabayas. Outside is the Harazesa. He has a vision that is 20 amos high. And now, as he keeps on looking into the Beis HaMikdash, it's going like this and going like this and going like this until he gets to the Ulam. Rabbi say, how much higher is the Ulam than this opening? 22 amos. 6 at the Ezra's Nashim, 7.5 at Nicanor, 2.5 at Ezra's Kohanim, and 6 at Ulam. That's 22 amos. So even if he looked at the highest point in this doorway, his vision is 20 amos high. And that's fine until you get to the 22 amos. And that's what this picture is showing you. If he looks through the door, then his vision is fine until you get to one of the steps. It's the lower line, the dotted line. When he would look through the door of Shushan Abira, his vision would be fine because he has 20 amos of vision. But then the Beis HaMikdash went like this. And at this point, it became 22. And then he lost his vision. He could not see inside the Heichel. And if he couldn't see inside the Heichel, he couldn't sprinkle the blood. So the option of looking above the wall doesn't work. The option of looking through the door doesn't work because he gets cut off at the last 2 amos. So they cut the wall down and they tell him to look above the wall. The door and the wall are now 25.5. And that gives him a vision straight through. And not going back to your diagram 15 is the top line. By cutting the wall, the eastern wall above the Shushan Abira down, so that it was only 5.5 amos above the door, he looked above that wall, the 5.5 amos, and he was able to see the floor of the Heichel. And that's what the top line is showing. Okay, so if you take a look, the picture itself is showing you in the Ezra's Nashim, below the Ezra's Nashim, it's showing 6, because the Ezra's Nashim is now 6 higher than the Harabayas. Underneath the Ezra's Kohanim, it's showing you 16. And underneath the Ulam, it's showing you 22. So that was the only way that the Kohen, who was Soref the Porah, can stand on Har HaZeisim and actually see the Heichel. That's the critical point. The critical point is that the Kohen Gadol diagram 16, the critical point is when the Kohen Gadol is standing on Har HaZeisim and wants to sprinkle the blood, he has to see this opening of the Heichel. So you would have to see above all of this. And the way they did it is right here at Shushan Habira. Rather than the wall being 100 amos high, they cut the wall down, and therefore right there, the wall was 5.5 amos above the door of 20, making the entire height, door and wall. Door height 20, wall height 5.5, that's 25.5. The Ezras Nashim was 26, so he still had a half an amma to look through, and then as the incline went up, he was able to see, until he was able to see the floor of the Heichel. I hope we explained that as best as we could, but that's the critical point. The critical point is that the Kohen Gadol had to see the opening of the Heichel when he sprinkled the blood of the Parah Aduma. And so the Mishnah now back, Perik Beis, Mishnah Dalit, Kol HaKsolim Shayu Sham, all the walls of the Har HaBayis, they were very high, tall. For our purposes, we'll say it's 100 amas, Chutz Mikosel HaMizrachi, except for the eastern wall. As I mentioned, there's a machlokas what that eastern wall means. Does it mean the whole eastern wall was lower, or does it mean the eastern wall was as high as the other walls, except the part above Shushan Habira was lowered? Shahakoin Hasorev Sapora, Hapora Omi Bar Mishka, the Kohen who's going to burn the Parah Aduma stands on Har HaMishka, Har HaZeisim, Umiskaven Veroa Bepisro Shel Eichel, and he gives attention that he sees the opening of the Heichel, B'shas Hazoyas Hadam, when he sprinkles the blood. So there are three options: not to do anything, but then he can't see over the wall. Tell him to look through the door. If he looks through the door, his vision's going to get cut off because the door is 20 high, and the Heichel is 22 amas elevated above that, so he won't be able to see the floor of the Heichel. The other third option is to cut the wall above the Shushan Habira and tell him not to look in the door, look above the door, which was 5.5 amos, door and wall 25.5. He then can look in because the first incline is at 26, the Ezras Nashim, and he has that half amma he can see in, and then it continued rising, and he was able to see the floor of the Heichel. We'll just learn a couple of lines in Mishnah Hay to get us started for tomorrow. In Yetz Hashem, we've mentioned this. Perek Beis, Mishnah Hay, Ezras Hanoshim Haya Oyrech Meya Ushloshim V'chomesh Arochav Meya Ushloshim V'chomesh. Some people have asked me where these measurements come from. All these measurements come from Mishnayos. So the Ezras Noshim right here, it is not part of the Azor. It has a different Kedusha. This is Yerushalayim. This is Shushan Habira. This becomes Har HaBayis. This thin wall is the Soreg. The place between the Soreg and the wall of the Ezras Noshim is called the Chayil. And you enter Ezras Noshim. This Ezras Noshim is a square. It's 135 amos by 135 amos. That's the Mishnah. Ezras Hanoshim Hoysa Orach Meya Ushloshim V'chomesh Arochav Meya Ushloshim V'chomesh. And then the Mishnah, which we'll continue tomorrow, will describe for us what the Ezras Noshim looked like and the 4 rooms in the Ezras Noshim. As I mentioned earlier, one of the rooms was for someone who Chas v'Shalom became Tomei Tzaras. There was a mikveh there for him. And that's going to deal with Tum and Tahara again, which we'll go into tomorrow. And hopefully, B'neder, we'll try to finish Perek Beis this week. The next week's Perek, Me'etz Hashem, we move further into the Beis HaMikdash. And we're going to learn about how to build the Mizbeach.